Here's a fact of life regarding something that we all have in common. We've all been made by God to worship. The question is, who or what will we choose to worship? True and proper worship is our active response to God, whereby we declare His supreme glory and worth, not just when we gather to sing, but with every fiber of who we are in every moment and endeavor of our lives. What are we doing to prepare our kids to worship this way in spirit and in truth, both now and for the rest of their lives? Listen in to learn how to curate deep, countercultural, and meaningful worship times with your kids as we chat with seasoned and thoughtful worship leaders Tom Yarbrough and Tammi Rhoton on this episode of Youth Culture Matters.
From the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, this is Youth Culture Matters. If you're a parent, youth worker, educator, counselor, grandparent, or anyone else who cares about kids, we're glad you've joined us for this practical, informative, and hope-filled podcast. This is a place where together we talk and think Christianly about the rapidly changing world of today's children, teens, and young adults.
Well, I'm very excited about the conversation we're going to have today on this episode of Youth Culture Matters as we talk about worship. Worship is certainly a big part of what we've been called to. It really is at the foundation of what we've been called to as followers of Jesus Christ and as God's people. And I think that we've heard a lot about worship wars and disagreements about what worship is. So today we want to talk to a couple of folks who can help us center in on what worship is and how we can best worship and teach our kids, our students in our youth groups to worship. So we're excited about that, and I'm excited to have Tom Yarbrough and Tammi Rhoton join us, along with Jake Beer, who's a youth pastor who will be here representing so many of our listeners. Jake's a boots-on-the-ground youth worker at Springton Lake Presbyterian Church outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and one of our CPYU research fellows here. So we're happy to have Jake here. But let me jump to Tom and to Tammi and just say welcome. And I'm going to let the two of you just take turns, tell a little bit about yourselves and anything that would really apply that we need to know that would apply to what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Walt, so much for having us. I'll let Tammi go first with introducing herself, but we're glad to be on the podcast with you.
Absolutely. My name is Tammi Rhoton. I've been going to the Village Chapel for about 24 years, and I grew up in East Tennessee in Kingsport, and I grew up in church and really connected with youth worship there and gave my life to Christ as a teenager. Inside of a service with worship. And so it's always been powerful to me through the years. Moved around Seattle, New York, came back to Nashville. I've been a songwriter here. And then, I'm part of the youth. I'm a youth leader here at our church and also part of the worship ministry. And just, it's been a huge gift to me over the years.
Yeah. Now, thanks, Tammi. And let me just ask you. You mentioned Village Chapel. Mm-hmm. You've been there longer than Tom. We learned that. Can you just tell us a little bit about the Village Chapel? I've had a chance to worship there. I've gotten to know several folks who were there, and I love what's going on at the Village Chapel. But explain what this place is and this congregation and some of the uniqueness about it that relates to worship.
Yeah, I think the first time I stepped foot in the building, there's 49 people there, and we were in the very front right corner. And I think something about going through books of the Bible, something about that style of teaching, and then also the worship alongside it, it really spoke to me early on. It kind of, it's a posture really, so that it kind of helped set the tone for the church, to have a posture of, obedience, surrender, gratitude, really stating that it was kind of more of a way of life and not just the 3 songs before the service kind of feel to it.
Yeah, worship is a way of life.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Tom.
well, I was just going to say that 25 years later, since the beginning of the Village Chapel, we remain a church that we happen to teach through books of the Bible in our Sunday morning services, and the shape of our liturgy, if we could call it that, has developed and clarified in some ways, I think, over the years, but it's still very true to what it was in the beginning, which was that we were going to build in, sort of a good cycle of revelation and response for the people who came. And originally, the Village Chapel was a Sunday night church that was designed for and because of touring musicians who could not get back into town on a Sunday morning in time to go to a church service. And so it initially was many, many touring musicians who were looking for a place where they could come on a Sunday night.
Yeah. And your
It
role
also
oh,
kind
go
of
ahead.
felt, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It also kind of felt like just people who had been to church many times that were just tired and worn out with the worship show. And that kind of was just a safe place for them to land, that it didn't feel, kind of, for lack of a better word, manipulative in that way. Just kind of, just kind of the truth, just some basic truths.
Yeah.
Well, I want to come back to that at some point, the worship show, because that's really a big part of what we want to address here as we talk about worship. But let me jump back to Tom. Tom, give us a little bit of background on what you're doing there at the Village Chapel, your role in worship, and maybe some. Look, I could say this because I was there and I've watched online. There's a lot of unique aspects about your worship. There's marks of it, and I know a lot of them are probably very deliberate. I have some things in mind. I hope I'm not setting you up with something you can't answer, but yeah. So talk about that a little bit, but your background there first.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in northeastern Oklahoma, just about 30 minutes outside of Tulsa, and grew up in a pretty traditional small stream of the church at Southern Baptist. And really didn't come to Nashville until I was into college for a few years, and then came to Belmont University, which is just, we can almost see it from the window of the room that we're in the church. It's a neighborhood church here. Neighborhood university here near the church. But I grew up similar to Tammy. I grew up in the church, grew up very much in the music of the church. I grew up in a hymn singing church, and piano and organ, but hymn singing was dear to us in our church, and was kind of almost like a celebrated sacred thing. And so really revered hymn singing. But in the 90s, early 90s especially, was exposed to the world of what was then CCM, music. And I would go to concerts where there'd be a bit of worship, but also a bit of performing. And I think it was probably Stephen Curtis Chapman or someone like that who made me want to play guitar, maybe more so than listening to my dad's Beatles records. There was something I could relate to about that, and so started playing guitar and leading worship in a youth context at probably right around the time I was 18 or so, and have continued that in some respects throughout my life. Was a bivocational worship leader at a small church in Nashville for about 8 years. And then in 2015, 16, probably started getting involved more with the Village Chapel. My family and I have been here for about 17 years. And but it took me a while to want to kind of step into being involved with the worship team, probably because I was a little crispy from my last stint, and I just needed some rest. I just needed to worship and be a person in the congregation for as long as I could. But got involved with that. Really, really loved the distinctives of worship at the Village Chapel, and began to offer my services at another campus that we had in town on the east side of town for a while, and became the primary worship leader there. And then after COVID, that wasn't sustainable for us to keep that campus open. And so we folded everything into the main campus here. And so the role has developed into what is now called pastor of worship and ministries. And so the ministries part is some other things that I do with the folks who lead the ministries here in the church. But the worship piece is mainly about mostly leading on Sunday mornings, but also leading the musicians that we have in our rotation, the people who are part of the worship ministry, overseeing the choir ministry, not directing the choir. We have a brilliant choir director who we work with that, I mean, he does such a good job with our choir. And we don't have a choir every Sunday, but we have a vibrant, active choir that rehearses just about every week to prepare for special occasions. And then, putting together the worship services along with whoever the teaching pastor is on those weeks so that we can just have a good cohesive flow to the service. There are predictable elements of our service every week, which is, I think, good. And then there are also times whenever we say, maybe we need to do something a little different this week. But for the most part, we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have what we would kind of consider a liturgical flow. And so our aim is to try to be thematically cohesive, and that is anchored in whatever the text is that we're teaching that week, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great. So I've been there, and I've watched online, and it's what you described. It's very different when you experience it. And I'll just say this, and maybe you can speak to this as well. We've got two accomplished musicians here we're talking to, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate. I mean, not many people listening to this could be in a place where you would have so many great musicians, right? You're in Nashville, you've got all those folks there. Tom, I remember you telling me what it's like to stand up there and play your guitar. Who was it you were saying was sitting in the front row? I'll let you say it.
It was probably Phil. It was probably Phil Kagi.
Yeah, Phil Kagi while you're playing your guitar. Yeah, I thought I'd let you say
Phil,
it. But
my palms are getting a little sweaty with you just mentioning that.
Yeah, but this is also the church where I believe the Gettys are. So those who are familiar with the hymns, the modern hymns of the Gettys, and the intentionality of those, and that's where you get, like, if you understand that, you get a real flavor here, and the musicianship is wonderful. But at the same time, I'm going to say this, that I noticed that in a environment where so much of worship leading seems to me to be performance on a stage, personalities on a stage, you guys do a good job of making sure that doesn't happen. Is that intentional? And, how has that worked out?
It is by design, not because we are, anxious about the idea that someone might be recognized for doing a good job or anything like that. We do it by design because we really just want the focus to be on Jesus.
Yeah.
And so we don't tend to have things spread across the stage in a way that makes them very visible during a worship service. We want people to hear what we're doing because musically we're trying to support their singing. That's our main goal is to lead and support their singing.
Right.
And but most Sundays, someone will come up to me after the service and say, "Did you lead today?" and I'll say, "Yeah, I did." And they'll say, "Oh, it was great," or whatever, But they don't know who it is necessarily because they don't see. Part of that's because we don't have an auditorium, with the kind of seating that allows you to see every part of the front. But part of it is we designed it, to be presented in a way that didn't draw attention to us. We want to point the attention to Jesus.
Yeah, I love that. So let me go to Jake and Chris here. I mean, either one of you can answer. Because Jake, you were at the summit last year, correct? When Tom was leading worship, and Chris and I were there as well. So just to give everybody else a little background, last year at the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit, which was our third, we had Tom come in, and Ben was with you, right? Playing
Ben Kaufman.
Yeah, what do we want to say? Are we to call that a violin or a fiddle? What's the proper way?
He'd call it a violin.
Okay, I figured as much. I don't want to insult him, but and Ben, I mean, and what? Yeah, I'm just going to say this. No ego on the part of either of these folks, but really there to lead, and that was something that impressed me, that we could hear ourselves singing. where many times in modern worship, you can't hear yourself singing, and B, when you look around, not many people are singing. They're swaying and listening and that sort of thing, more like being at a concert. But Jake, you were there, and as a youth leader, I'm just going to pick your brain a little bit here. What was unique about that was helpful to you as a youth worker, just as you return back and you think about leading worship with your students? What you saw there, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I was very blessed by the worship at the summit and really appreciate you, Tom, and Ben. I think what stood out to me, it was probably just that, right? Your humility in leading us. I mean, Ben, I know in a couple of the songs had violin pieces that were added apart. You could tell he's a very talented musician, but that was not to show off or to kind of put himself out there. It was to lead us all in worship. I was really blessed by that. And hearing from you guys then too, as you each kind of took the mics at certain points and leading us in meditations before the next song about something or something.
Yeah. And I was saying to them beforehand, Jake, I was saying that, it was interesting there that there were a lot of people there who had never experienced anything like that in their worship experiences in their churches, perhaps when they were growing up or wherever they are now. And so there was sort of this funny look on certain people's faces initially. But I thought, Tom, we talked about that beforehand, right? And you were just happy when it all started and you could hear people singing because people were right there with you, and it was a beautiful thing. Chris, did you want to say anything about what that experience was like or what you noticed? Because for me, it was didactic in two ways. First and foremost, it taught me through the choice of beautiful hymns and beautiful more modern songs. And it was didactic as well because it taught me, with a breath of fresh air, this is what worship is to be. We really can go deeper in this. But Chris, would you?
Yeah, I had the privilege of kind of knowing what songs were being chosen ahead of time because Tom granted me the privilege of putting together the slides and having the words on the screen and whatnot. So
sometimes at the very last minute.
That was okay though. I knew the collection from which they might be chosen from, and yes, and so it was just a breath of fresh air. All the songs were just it was so much. It was refreshing to my soul is the best way to put it. So much, I had to be careful. I had to make sure I paid attention so that I advanced the slides in the right time because sometimes I'd get in a beautiful way. I would get wrapped up in the beauty of the worship. But it comes down to the gospel centered nature of the songs chosen was really what stood out to me.
Yeah,
that was just so refreshing.
Yeah. So let me ask you. I'll ask the two of you a question here. How would you, I'll ask you. What is worship? How would you define that? And how would you? Do we differentiate between corporate worship? Do we just get lost in corporate worship and not think about worship as a way of life? How would you instruct your students with a definition of worship and then, working functional understandings of what worship is? Because I think we have a lot of misunderstandings out there.
Okay. I think, honestly, I would say that worship engages our entire being, our mind, our will, emotions, because we're responding to a triune God. And it talks about that in Psalms 95 and using our emotions, shouting and singing, our will, our submission, to kneel and bow down and to reason, hear, listen, accept. And if it's not changing our life patterns, then it's not worship. It can be cultural, it can be aesthetic, but it's not real worship if that is not changing us from within and carrying that out through our everyday.
Yeah, Tammy, I like how you just said it can be cultural, and that's not. I don't think that's something we really should desire or make primary. Obviously, we want to have relevant forms, I suppose, but that's one reason why I'm glad you said that, because that's one. Some people might ask, well, why would you have a conversation about worship on Youth Culture Matters? And it's for that very reason there, that we need to think about culture and how that informs our worship. Tom, anything you would want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, this might answer more of the question of what does worship do, or what does it look like, than what it is. But I think that as I mentioned earlier, as we're facilitating response to the revelation of the gospel, right? Response to who God is, what He's done, who we are, right? As sinners, the reality of our fallenness, all of those things. The worship ought to be a kind of, I think Brian Chappell might have written this at some point. I've read some of his books. Worship should be a kind of gospel storytelling. Worship should tell the story of the gospel. It should flow in the same way that our heart response to the gospel flows, in a way, right? We have adoration, we have confession, we have thankfulness, gratefulness. We are proclaiming His goodness. All of those things, and all of those are elements of a good holistic sort of worship diet, I think. And they're responsive things. We're not stirring those up on our own. We're responding to what Christ has done. We're responding to that with this offering, with this form. And I think Tammy's right when she says our whole being. I mean, that really is what distinguishes it from being this thing that I just show up and sing. And I'm not saying that that's not formative. I think singing is very formative, but that limits worship in a way that it's not intended to be limited. Yeah. And so our worship in church, sometimes when we say that, I think we assume we mean our singing, but we don't really. We shouldn't mean just our singing. We should mean all of what we're offering to the Lord in a worship service, all of what we're offering to Him outside of a worship service. Yeah. Our bank accounts are our worship report. Right? I mean, when we look at what we spend our resources on, what we spend our time on, our calendars are our worship report. So yeah, we don't want to limit it, but at the same time, in the corporate setting, you mentioned that in the corporate setting, I think it does look like how do we as a people together respond to the story of who we are, who God is, where we're going, all of those things.
Yeah, that's good. Before we take a break, Jake, I want to go back to you and say, as you're listening to this conversation here, how have you maybe implemented some of these things into how you're doing worship there with your students? Is there, maybe some pointers on intentionality, the way that you've thought through this, and maybe just echoing some of the things that you've heard here from Tom and Tammy?
Sure. So we've started to kind of implement some times of worship into our youth ministry schedule. It's been a little bit hard because I'm kind of the one who has to lead it in addition to everything else. But so trying to just kind of, give students that space of response, like towards the message or towards the things that they're hearing, giving them a time to respond in that way of glorifying the Lord. Like, okay, we've heard from God's word. Now let's give Him thanks and praise in that. I think one of my main areas, and maybe this is somewhere that we can discuss a little bit further, is like just I'm constantly trying to help my students understand like Sunday morning is for you as well, right? The worship of Sunday morning, and so I want to do worship when we're together as just the youth group, but I also really want them to see themselves as worshipers with the rest of the body of Christ on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, and I've been there for worship there several times, and it is an intergenerational worship service, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Which I think we've lost in many churches. So, yeah, this is good. All right, we're going to take a break here. We're talking about worship. We're talking to Tom and Tammy and Jake, and we will be right back after this break. Hey, youth workers, it's happening again. The 4th Annual Northeast Youth Ministry Summit will be held from March 16 to 19 in the beautiful Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania at the Ligonier Camp and Conference Center. We invite you to join us for 4 days of deep and practical youth ministry training, shared meals, worship, and community building, all around this year's theme of Every Square Inch. We've assembled an experienced group of youth ministry trainers and practitioners who will lead you into a deeper understanding of how to raise up a generation of students who live out their faith in every square inch and moment of their lives. We'll gather for 6 large group sessions, and you can choose from 20 breakouts. And there's a whole lot more. Visit nymsummit.org for more information and to register. That's nymsummit.org. No matter where you live and are doing youth ministry, I hope you'll join us at the 2026 Northeast Youth Ministry Summit. Well, as we're talking about music here and talking about worship, I'm a little curious. Tom, you mentioned, the Beatles, your parents' Beatles records and things like that. I want to ask everybody, what's at the top of if you would hit play right now with a playlist that you have loaded, however you have that, what would you want to go to first? Who are you listening to? What are you listening to? I don't know who wants to start. Let me pick on Tom. By the way, I'm going to say this, Tom. I'm going to give you a minute to think a little more. Tom will be back at the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit to lead worship this year in March. And so we're very excited about that. And it's going to be a great opportunity for people. And you're going to lead a seminar on worship as well. So all of you aspiring worship leaders and those of you who are doing this with your youth ministry, you'll want to come and be a part of that. And our worship in the morning and the evening is just a wonderful, wonderful time together. So, all right, Tom, I gave you 30 seconds there to think.
So, you gave me time to think. Yeah. So first of all, I have to say in reference to the Beatles that my sister texted last night on her way to see Paul McCartney. And I was so happy for her and upset at the same time because we grew up in a house where the Beatles was, along with the Baptist hymnal, the Beatles was the primary part of the diet. So, and I didn't get tickets. So, but right now, so part of why I listen to what I listen to probably has to do with my kids and the ages that they are, and wanting to connect well with them. And my almost 17-year-old son thinks he discovered Chris Stapleton and has been sending me Chris Stapleton songs. I love Chris Stapleton. Have thought he was fantastic for a while, and so I've been listening to some Chris Stapleton lately. I really love his songwriting, love his musicianship. That's not Christian music, but it's good music. So
yeah.
And the new Springsteen movie is coming out. Well,
oh yeah. Did you watch? Watch the Bob Dylan movie?
I did.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Yeah,
I thought it was great. I'm a Bob Dylan fan. I thought it was great, but I have been listening to some Springsteen. I don't know that I'm excited about the movie, but I have been listening to some Springsteen.
Yeah, that's good. Tammy, what about you?
Oh my goodness. I think Aretha Franklin is probably, I just pop back and forth from some of the OG people. Yes.
Yeah, what the Queen of Soul, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Jake, can you top that? Either of those? He's laughing.
I don't know about that. But when Tom says about music for kids, I just was on a family vacation last week, road trip up to New Hampshire, which meant we were listening to Slugs and Bugs sing the Bible over and over and over and over again. Yeah. So I've actually even this week found myself singing a lot of the songs, which is actually really great because a lot of them are just straight up scripture.
Yeah.
So.
That's a great way to learn scripture too. So now I'm nervous about the next guy, Chris. Because it's always going to be weird.
Yeah, people who know me, I like to tell them my two favorite styles of music are punk music and hymns. So it depends on which day it is. So at the top of one list would be Five Iron Frenzy. It's still my favorite band. In less than a month, I get to go see them in concert. And I get the privilege of taking my entire family. They might say I'm making them go. It depends on who you ask, but taking the whole family to see them. So that's on the playlist because I'm, going back through all their catalog, preparing to see them live. And and if it isn't Five Iron or other punk / ska related music, it's old hymns.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Nice. That's such a nice
Yeah.
sort of a dichotomy of,
Yeah.
of sensibilities there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are good answers. The thing for me right now, I was just with a high school buddy. His mom passed away, and we spent a lot of time together, over the last few weeks, and we spent a ton of time together when we were in high school. And we talked a lot about what we would do in our afternoons, and we spent a lot of time up in his room with his stereo listening to the music of Chicago. And because of that, and then watching a documentary about Chicago and thinking back about, I don't know if you remember the guitarist Terry Kath, who lost his life tragically, early on in those band's years. Just been listening to that, so revisiting my adolescence, which, by the way, when you do that, when you start, you guys know this, music triggers memories, and some of them are great, some of them are not so great. So yeah, but I've been having memories triggered. All right, so Tom, we were talking during the break just a little bit about addressing, I think we were talking about like styles, how do we choose what it is we're going to put into our list of what we're gonna sing together as we worship, whether that's in the church, the larger church, with a full body of Christ, the spectrum of ages from older to younger, or like Tammy and Jake in a youth group setting. How would you give some practical advice on how we're tapping into you two as people who do it well? I know you're going to say, well, we're trying, but get past your humility here and help us understand, if you're leading people who are leading worship into how to choose, what would you recommend?
Yeah, you mind if I start?
Yeah, go for
Okay,
it.
yeah.
Go for
So Jake said something earlier about sending the message to his students that they're part of the larger congregation there at the church, and that kind of rung a bell for me, because part of what we are doing with our student worship, part of what Tammy does such a good job of, is connecting them through some of the song choice to those Sunday morning contexts. And so we would probably do them a disservice if we sort of cloistered them, musically on Wednesday nights when their groups meet, to sort of a style or a format or something that wasn't relatable at all to what we were doing on Sunday mornings. I think they would very much feel like, well, this is our world and that's the adult world. Or as I used to call it when I was really little, big church, right? We called it big church. And so, but because we have some overlap there with songs, they walk into a Sunday morning context feeling like some of that is very much for them, because they worship with those same songs on Wednesday nights. Now, they don't sound exactly the same, and they wouldn't and shouldn't sound exactly the same, but they know the songs, they know the melodies, they know the words, and they are used to responding with those songs. And so there's a little bit of muscle memory there for them in terms of just the act of worship, because of those songs. And part of why that's important, I think, is because as much as I hate to say this, worship, part of the struggle is worship has to be relatable. And especially when young people encounter something that they can't relate to or don't relate to, there's no quicker way for them to shut down, I think, when it comes to what you would want to otherwise be a healthy, heartfelt response. And so we're offering them in both contexts some familiarity and some cohesiveness, and that goes into some of the song selection. I think, I hope I'm not speaking for you on this, but I think I've seen that goes into some of the song selection on Tammy's part.
Yeah, just a comment there before we go to Tammy. What I heard you say is, you're really thinking through this, that there's intentionality about that overlap, and I just jotted down here, intentionality about forms, right? That right. So you're using the same thing. So Tammy.
Yeah, and I also think each youth group is so different with what I think the kids that come, they long for authentic connection. with us, with Jesus, with just they long for that. They actually really inspire me. And one of the gals, we went to a youth conference, and she just looked over and she was like, "Is this theologically sound? Is this like?" And it just cracked me up because I was like, "Yes, this is awesome."
This is a high schooler.
This is a high schooler, yeah. And I loved that because that's number one on what we're looking for on the song selections. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
I love that. Yeah.
I have a couple follow-up questions if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, so one would be for Tom, one would be for Tammi, but you can both take a stab at them if you want. So, Tom, you have a long history of doing this. So for those who maybe their song selections have been willy-nilly, they haven't been all that thoughtful, maybe they aren't familiar with the old hymns, they just don't, they can't pull them off the top of their head like you probably can. What is a practical way they can, what song, like, I'm not there, maybe they need to choose songs they're not yet familiar with. So like, where do they go to find these songs and know which ones they should be singing?
Oh yeah, that's a good question, because you're right. I probably do in some ways take for granted the wealth of songs that have been at my disposal my whole life through the hymnals, right? And so if someone didn't grow up with that kind of sitting in front of them, then yeah, they've got to start somewhere. I would say, and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm too redundant about this, I'd say start with the hymnals. Like, start with what are the songs that are in just about every hymnal that you open. The Trinity hymnal is one of the hymnals that I find to be the most probably the most packed with good songs. But any hymnal really that you open is going to have the ones that we probably ought to all know. It's going to have all the Isaac Watts stuff and the Fanny Crosby and all that. So I would say that starting with the hymnal, and then there's so many resources of ways to do those hymns that don't sound like you're trying to do some sort of a throwback piano and organ thing. And sources like Fernando Ortega, who's done lots of great hymns, sources like the Gettys, who in addition to writing hymns have done really great treatments of old hymns. Start searching YouTube for versions of hymns that you want to try, and find one that sounds like you could probably do it. We just had an evening of worship a few weeks ago. Tammi was part of it, and we were working on an arrangement of "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing" for Tammi to sing. And I found an arrangement that Shane did, and I'd never heard it and wasn't really familiar with it. But I sent it to her, and I said, "I really like this. Would you be okay if we tried this?" And she said, "Yeah, let's try it." And so we did it. It worked well for us. We kind of made it our own, but it worked well for us. But we had to go somewhere and get some inspiration for how to do that, even though we know that song. So yeah, I'd say those are all possible places to start. The way I learned all that was by being around it and being in it and being, it was caught more than it was taught, which I think is the case when it comes to a lot of worship theology. Sometimes it's caught more than it's taught. And when you don't have the opportunity to catch that in kind of that lifespan kind of way, then it can be harder to know where to start. But the good news is we have more resources now today than we ever have before, and they're all in our pockets, So that's where I tell someone to begin.
Yeah.
Well, one more follow-up to that, to jump off of the story that Tammi told about the student pausing and thinking, "Okay, is this
that's
song
good training.
Awesome?" I love it as well. So here's a practical question. This is coming from me as a volunteer youth leader. And Jake, feel free as a youth pastor to answer this question too. So I have also find myself at places, especially youth conferences and stuff, where a song comes on and I'm like, I have zero desire to sing this non-biblical song. And I'm stuck, right? Like, no part of me wants to participate because I just don't believe the lyrics of the song are leading people in a gospel-centered way. But I'm also there and I know small eyes middle schoolers are looking, they might be seeing me not singing, and that's also not a great example to set. So I'm kind of stuck in this, how do I participate in that mode? Do you have anyone have any advice on what to do in that kind of situation?
I was going to say real quick, Chris, that when you're in those moments, that's why they sing the same lyric over 40 times, hoping that eventually you'll get it.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Eventually, if we repeat something enough times, it becomes irresistible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
That's not working on me. I don't know. That just doesn't. Yeah. Jake, do you have a thought on that? I mean, what would you do if Chris was your volunteer?
Yeah. This is at an event, not at our youth group. Is that what you're proposing there, Chris?
I'll be honest, it's happened in both situations, but
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we would want to all agree that the songs we want to sing would be rich and doctrinal. We would want to agree with them theologically. Sometimes when you're like combined with other churches, like we've done retreats before with other youth groups, and like you don't really have control over the worship set or something, and you might be kind of scratching your head sitting there awkwardly in the pew. I think those become great teaching moments after the fact.
yes.
And then, I mean, I guess maybe it's a game time decision in the moment, right? Is this song just bad, or is it actually heretical, or is it, something like that? Like that's a maybe a finer line. But in the moments where, okay, this is not my first preference, I don't prefer this worship style. Like, how do we just kind of submit to one another out of love? If whatever our church background is, maybe we worship more traditional hymns or contemporary or very contemporary, or how do we come together as brothers and sisters in Christ and kind of lay aside our personal preferences in order to worship together? But maybe that's a game time decision.
Yeah, that was a good answer. We put you on the spot there, Jake, just to test you. That was good. I'm thinking about the hymns because, let me relay a story here. So I've got a buddy. I've had him. He's been a buddy for years. He was ministering in a denomination where it was most of the cutting edge, modern. When I say cutting edge, this is what's on the playlist. You're going to hear on the radio and such. Some of the songs that would just, in my estimation, based on the way that I grew up, be lacking the kind of depth and theological integrity that you would have, Tom, as you say, from the hymnal, the Trinity hymnal. I think they use that at our church, and I know Jake, that's in our denomination, that's there as well. So I was kind of ribbing him a little bit about this, and I brought up a couple of hymns like. You mentioned like Fanny Crosby, or you think about, I was listening to something from William Cowper this morning, and I started bringing those things up. He had no clue. And he kind of, and admittedly, he would say this to me, he mockingly laughed at me like, you're just old. You're just old. You don't get it. You're not with it. So we didn't see each other for about 6 months, and they came and they spent Thanksgiving with us, and it was a nice day, so he and I went out on our bicycles on a trail. And as we're riding, I still remember him just out of the blue turning to me and saying, hey, you know how you were telling me to listen to those old hymns? I've listened to a couple, and they're actually pretty good. And, I just think it's people have not been exposed to that. So, like, I got a letter, we got a prayer letter from a friend of ours who does missions work with Native Americans up in the Northwest. He's an older guy, and he had a devotional piece on the front, and it was very timely because it was about heartache, it was about pain, it was about the suffering we experience as believers, that not everything is great, and emotions aren't always high. And I'm just going to read this. He at the end, he put this verse in from God Moves in a Mysterious Way, which, by the way, when weird things happen in my life, the first line of that hymn comes into my mind all the time, and I sing it. God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. But this was the line, "Oh, fearful saints, new courage take. The clouds that you now dread are big with mercy and will break in blessings on your head. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust him for his grace. Behind a frowning providence, he hides a smiling face." I mean, there's a whole theology there that we've lost in the church of suffering and difficult providences, and these are the things that carry us in life. And this is where I go back to just applaud you folks for what you're doing with the hymns and the didactic nature of that. We sang these kinds of things, right, at the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit, which was a a beautiful, beautiful thing. Could you maybe make some other recommendations about, you said where to go? One of the things I would say is, Tom, you mentioned YouTube, and you mentioned the nights of worship you do at Village Chapel. I don't know how many of those are online. There was one I watched after the summit, and it will just give people a sense of how you folks do this, how you curate it, how you execute it, how you get out of the way, how you allow the text to speak and to teach. So that would be one thing to look, and we'll include links to all these things. Anything else? I'm thinking about, I don't know if anybody's seen, I guess it's Kevin Twitt, the Indelible Grace folks, did that night at the Ryman. I don't know if you saw that, where they told stories behind these hymns. And one of my devotional books years ago was this, 1-year book of hymns, where they tell the stories behind all the hymns, which just bring everything to life, as opposed to, well, we just sat down and we wrote something we thought was good. These come out of the stories of the people from whence they come and their experience with the Lord, so they're very heartfelt. But any other thoughts on some recommendations?
Robert Morgan, who's a area pastor here in Nashville, also has at least 3 volumes of books called Then Sings My Soul, if I remember right, that are stories behind hymns. And those are really great resources as well to sort of understand and know, the history of hymns and the history of the hymn writers and the stories behind why they wrote them. I should also, while we're talking about hymnals, say the Getty's new hymnal is fantastic and really is a great merging of traditional hymn content with a lot of the newer stuff. And they've included some things in there that was a little bit unexpected as far as I was concerned from some very modern sources. They really cast a wide net with it. And I think they've done a good job of putting together a great resource for churches and worship leaders.
And I think people who may not realize that they know who the Gettys are, you would draw the connection there with some of the initial songs we heard, like In Christ Alone, right? Yeah. The Power of the Cross. We sing. I'm in a very traditional Presbyterian church, and we sing Getty hymns. Yeah, we sing them. So that's a stretch for us.
Yeah.
Not
a little
really.
New for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little new. Yeah, if it's past 1600, it's a little bit risky for us. But this is good. Any others you'd recommend, or beyond those? Maybe, I don't know if Jake, you found some sources. Tammy, if you have any, and I'd be curious, Tammy. In addition, what do your students like when you start the first few chords of a certain song? What is lighting up, your students? What gets them going? Yes.
Well, I love just our church body and bridging the songs that we do sing at Big Church. They actually love those songs. They actually really connect with those. So we sing a lot of the songs that, a lot of the hymns that we sing in service, we will use. And that is one spot. And then also, these kids are seeking the Lord, and I grow and learn from them all the time. And I ask them all the time, what songs are you listening to? What songs are moving you? What songs go, we're going through Genesis right now in youth group. Like, what songs connect with this, just creation and new, and they really are, I just love opening up that dialogue with them. That allows us to talk about song content, and how we can work that in as well. And so, I would say for the bulk, they actually, they long to sing the hymns that we do in Big Church. And then, 20%, I would say, are other songs that, that they find that we kind of run through the gamut to see if they will work with the service.
Jake, I'm going to go to you in a minute. I'll give you a minute to think, like what have you really made sure the kids are aware of and that they're singing now, some recommendations or a recommendation of a particular hymn or song you might have. I was born at the wrong time because my youth group experience was, the early to mid 1970s, and we were doing things like, and you're not even going to know what this is, but putting the text of Amazing Grace to different tunes.
Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, that's sad. I wasn't going to mention that one, but the Gilligan's Island theme, the Coca-Cola, that song.
Teach the world to sing.
Yeah, I'd like to teach the world to sing. And then the other one was, I think, To the House of the Rising Sun, if you remember that old one. But it was like a game. We were more tuned into what can we put this text to, but yeah. Jake, any thoughts recommendations you want to give?
Yeah, I would agree with Tom and Tammy. Another that comes to mind, another group besides like the Gettys or so on, is City of Light. Is the church that puts out music from, I think they're in Australia.
Yeah.
They post all their chord sheets online. I'm a guitar player who will never be in Nashville anytime soon. I could play campfire chords, so it's really great that they have pretty simple melodies and chord structures. We really like to use some City of Light music in our youth group.
That's great. That's good.
We love them.
Love them, yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back and finish up our conversation. I've got some more questions here from some folks that they would love to have answered, and we'll fire some of them off. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Our mission here at CPYU is to increase the ability of home and church to nurture children and teens into a lifetime of biblically faithful, whole-life Christian discipleship. That's why we've created our free weekly Youth Culture Field Report. It's a weekly resource filled with the latest youth culture news, research, trends, biblically sound analysis, and more. If you want to lead the children and teens you know and love through the rapidly changing world of today's youth culture, you need to subscribe to this free weekly resource. It's easy. Just go to cpyu.org and scroll down to find the subscription link. Subscribe to the CPYU Youth Culture Field Report today so that we can walk alongside you in your efforts to nurture kids in the Christian faith. All right, we've got in this last segment some very practical questions to ask you. And man, we got some great questions from some folks. We haven't gotten to many of them at all, but what we've heard is great. But here's a very practical one. For someone who's trying to take what we're saying here and be more intentional about it, I love this question from John Tessel. He says, could you give a list of 5 hymns to sing at a youth group? So, what have you found just to launch out for someone who's doing this maybe for the first time? Give us 5 to start. That sounds like an unfair question, but I think it's great. I think it's a great question, to land on and give some help to some folks who are going, I don't know where to begin with this.
Well, so there's some leeway here, I hope, when it comes to what we mean by hymn. But I'm just going to say, I think Tammy would include this in her list probably, but students respond well to His Mercy is More by Matt Boswell. And I love what that declares again about our sinful state and the goodness of God toward that, right? His grace, His mercy. So that's one that I think is part of our students.
That is. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Hallelujah, what a Savior. They really love that one. It is well.
It might be known as Man of Sorrows.
Yeah, that's right.
What a name is it? That's
yeah.
Sometimes that's the title of the hymn. Sorry, what was the next one?
It is well with my soul is always a strong one too.
Now, pay attention to that because it is well with my soul when we think about it, right? That's like a very almost adult response to heavy tragedy. Like we always that's sung at funerals, and we sort of think of it in that way. And students respond well to that. Why? Well, because they live in chaos most of the time, right? So the idea that we'd be offering them something like that, and they can gravitate toward that, that's huge.
And that's one, by the way, to tell the backstory on, right? because the
Oh, yeah.
backstory on that is like gut
It's
wrenching.
powerful.
Yeah, it is
Powerful.
unbelievable, and they'll never forget that. They'll never forget
Right.
that. That's good. Jake, do you have any that you've in your strumming, your simple chords?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's like just even as you bring up it as well, I feel like there's a bunch of songs that we just like want kids to know. These are the songs that we want them to sing in the hospital and in the, carry with them their entire Christian life. That can, Amazing Grace, like is the most famous song of all time. But Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, Be Thou My Vision.
Yeah.
Those are some like classics. I think that should be on repeat.
Yeah. I'm glad my grandkids are sitting under Jake. This is awesome. I get more excited about every time I talk to him. So, yeah. Chris, you had a question you wanted to throw that I think it was one Josh Good had.
Yeah, I'll kind of combine a couple questions that were submitted from good friend Josh Good. Often in youth ministries, it's a common thing to have youth step up who are developing their gifts and abilities as musicians, so they might be involved in playing guitar or other instruments or singing and leading in that way. So, one, how do we help students who are kind of still figuring out that giftedness? How do we help encourage them in those gifts, but also recognizing that's a big effort, right? That's a long-term, time-intensive type of thing. So how do we balance that investment in them with also having to provide quality worship experiences on a Wednesday night or Sunday night, whatever it happens to be?
Well, so I'm not going to pretend that we've got this nailed down because every year, we have potentially a different combination of kids that are willing or available and able to help with this. But one of the things that Tammy has really done a good job of over the past few years is identifying the kids who there's that intersection of willingness and ability and availability. And when she sees that, she's able to get in there and start to develop. And that takes a lot of patience. And I don't mean that because the kids aren't good at what they do. It just takes a lot of patience to work with a group of students who all have different schedules and different, levels of ability, et cetera. But what she's been able to do is put together a pretty consistent arrangement of instrumentation week to week, where most weeks the students show up to worship and there's a student on piano, there's a student on bass guitar, there's a student on percussion. We have a student who's usually on cello, at least three people singing, and then Tammy just kind of anchors them with acoustic guitar.
Three chords.
Yeah. And the truth. Now she anchors them with acoustic guitar and has coached them through basically leading their own group, their own cohort group through this worship service. And she just kind of sits over in the corner and supports. She does not lead them. Now, that took time to get to that point. And she can speak more to what it takes to do that. But I can tell you that as an observer, what I've seen is that she's very, very patient with the kids. She knows who she's got, what she's got to work with week to week, and she's very, very patient. But she also expects something out of the kids once they've committed. If they've committed to it, then she has an expectation, and they know what the expectation is, and she's very clear with that. Am I wrong? My son was part of this for a number of years. My son was the percussionist until he graduated.
Yeah.
And he misses it too. But so I got to see it as a parent, what that was like.
Yeah, it's just, man, it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. I'm humbled by it every Wednesday night. But we have a couple of real leaders in our youth group, and man, I just love seeing them have ownership over this worship team, and they have put a lot into this, and I've watched them grow in the Lord, and it's just been so humbling and so beautiful. But having the practical piece of having all the sheet music ready and having things set up for them as they come in, there's that practical piece of things. And then, having a really great musician and somebody who's a beginner, and having something in the middle that's going to push that beginner and just kind of be consistent for and I always tell them, like, there's always going to be a better musician here, usually better than me. But what we're going to do is find this common ground to create a tone, create a posture, create a way of life that's going to be infectious for these kids, and what an honor to do so.
Yeah, Tammy, I want to follow up on that because our kids are growing up in a world, we're living in a world where we're being nurtured into believing that our value and worth comes from being an influencer. And that includes having a following, whether it's on social media or being up front. And, the role models, even in the worship world, are those who are drawing the large crowds. One of the things I like, I don't think you guys charge to come to your worship nights, do you? I mean, yeah. So, I mean, that's the way I think it should be. That's a whole nother conversation to have. But when you're working with students who are growing up in a world like that, and now you're putting them up with a talent in front of their peers, they're there and they're being seen. How do you, have you had to be intentional about helping them understand, look, there is a big difference between performing and leading. With a big difference between wanting to be up front and be seen and developing a following, which is, rooted in pride, as opposed to leading with humility. And as Tom was saying at the beginning, like not even being seen in many ways when you're up front, being deliberate about taking that posture.
Yeah, I think that this has been shown to them over the years, like since they were in children's church on up. I feel like this is like an investment in each other, just to remind each other, like we're declaring value. So worship declares value. And so I feel like they do a really great job with this, just because, there's going to be signs when things start becoming performance based, so we just look for those and hold each other accountable in that. And, praying beforehand and setting that tone together and having them pray. They pray in the worship service there. And it's just, I truly believe that our heart's posture is what we're going for, to try to create a worshipful environment.
Yeah, there's so much. Go ahead.
Oh, and just something that is not going to be in that 30-minute time frame, that's going to be taught to them so they can take that throughout the week, because we're all worshiping something throughout the week. We're all doing that. So let it be the gospel. Let it be what we're worshiping is the Lord. And so just kind of hearing that and training that, so it's not just something for 30 minutes on a Wednesday night.
I think that might go. Jake, does that mesh what Tammy just said with what you were thinking about asking? Do you want to finish this off? You had a question, or you were forming a question. Is it fair to go to you with that right now?
Sure. Yeah, I think it relates. Yeah. Just my question was, in the world of youth ministry, we everything is all about energy, including our worship, right? We want kids to get amped up in worship. And just how do we, beyond just like song selection, how do we really kind of show worship as a way of life that, God meets us in the good times, the bad times? Where's the room for lament and doctrine? How do you do that as a worship leader?
Again, it's partly as an observer, and because occasionally I get to come in and help. When Tammy goes out of town, she lets me come in and help the kids with their worship, so I get to be there with them, which I love. We have a shape to our student worship services, and again, it's not too different from how we do our main services on Sundays, in that we know what to expect. We know the shape of those. The kids know and understand the shape of that. And so they've been outside, they've been playing their games, they've been having some good, hard fun and fellowship. And they know that when they come into the room where we have a worship service, that things begin to move toward that shape, right? And instinctively, they begin to kind of enter that. And so we have some announcements. and that helps them start to settle down. And I realize I'm not talking about the high energy. I'm talking about like our kids start to get an appropriate energy because of how we've shaped the format of the service.
Yeah.
There's some announcements, and maybe there's some silliness involved in the announcements, and that's okay. And again, we're patient because we've got 6th and 7th graders in there, and we've got juniors and seniors in there, and so we've got to be really patient with where kids are. And then someone on the worship team, a student, will invite them to pray. We'll pray. We'll sing a song. A student then will come up and read the scripture that's going to be taught that night. And so we're right at that point, we're infusing the word into the service, right? And so there's more. I think there's even more of that entering into sort of that posture of, okay, there's some reverence there, because now we're reading scripture together. And that's a student doing that. And then again, another student-led song. And then that has brought us into the time where it's time for the teaching. And so that flow is something that the kids understand, invites them toward this reverent spirit. And so we don't do a whole lot of the high energy stuff. We don't find that we have to do a whole lot of the high energy stuff, because at that point in the evening, the kids understand where we're heading and they go there. That is not to say that there's not exceptions, that you don't have 6th and 7th grade boys who want to continue to be silly. But you do, you're going to, and that makes sense in that context. But we're not intentionally trying to wrestle that, because what we've noticed is that when we invite the kids to kind of get serious, they get serious. And, I don't know how big your youth group is. Our youth group is not huge, especially for a church our size in Nashville. And so maybe it's easier because we're not huge. But we've not really ever felt like we had to get in there and be high energy with the worship, because we allow lots and lots of high energy outlet in other parts of the night for them. And I think a lot of our kids come in so tired on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
They probably couldn't do high energy. Am I wrong about that?
No,
Tammi?
you are
Yeah.
so right.
Yeah.
But it's true where it differs from youth group to
Yeah.
youth group of what you really, as part of being open to what the Lord has and pivoting to
Right.
some different,
But
experience.
I want to go back to and emphasize the shape of that service has been the same for at least 3 years.
At least 3 years, yeah.
And so you've got a lot of kids who are catching that, and right. So people who were 7th graders then are 9th or 10th graders now, and they understand how it works. And your seniors have seen it from the beginning, and so that culturally they do what they do. They enter in together because we've invested in that culture of the service, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, Jake, did you want to follow up with anything? I thought that was a great answer. Yeah. So a last thought here as you're talking, and maybe it's unfair to bring this up now because you might argue with it, but as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, as you curate these things, I'll use that word, it's very intentional. It's meant to be very didactic. It's everything from the songs you choose, musically, textually, to a room itself, the form of the room itself, the way things are scheduled. And I think, too many times, this has been my experience, we think that with kids we've got to go straight to the emotions. And the problem with that is you may just leave everything at the emotions. It doesn't get to the head and to the heart. And I always feel like, for me personally, and even when I think back to when I was a kid, the things that really hit me came to me through my head. And as I was able to work through that, boy, did it hit and spark my emotions, and it would land in my heart. And I think if we would stop trying to get kids to get fired up and think that, well, that's success. The kids had their hands raised, they were jumping around, nobody got hurt in the midst of the smoke and the lights. That's success. That's not, right? And so it's the long term. I think about that a lot. This has been a great conversation, and I want to thank you guys for being on here, Tom, and then Tammi and Jake as well, for taking time out of your day to do this. I really appreciate this. And Chris, as always, I'm grateful for you and what you've done here to put this together. And you have more work to do, because you're going to put the books, the songs, the links, everything on the page for this particular player underneath. If people go to the show notes, they'll be able to link to everything we've talked about here. And I do want to just one last thing and recommend this because I think so highly of these folks. But check out the Village Chapel online and go to their worship nights, their hymn sings, those things. Just a beautiful, beautiful time. And by the way, Tom, our mutual friend Duffy, he will often say to me when he's on the road, "Yeah, I worshiped at the Village Chapel today." But he's, somewhere else around the world. And he appreciates it as well. Good. So, all right. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. And we will catch you on the next episode of Youth Culture Matters.
Thanks for joining us for Youth Culture Matters, a podcast from the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding. If you'd like to learn more about today's youth culture, visit our website at cpyu.org. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, email us at podcast@cpyu.org.